Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 288. Greta,
Hey.
what you up to?
Well, not too. Drinking coffee.
Drinking coffee.
This is a morning episode.
Morning recording. So we'll see how this goes. Normally we're recording later in the day. So yeah, I got to get the cobwebs out of the brain. In this episode, we will be discussing chapter 9 of the Silmarillion of the Flight of the Noldor.
This is such a good chapter.
Yeah, it's packed.
So packed.
Before we get started, we'd like to give a double up air five to our patrons.
Yes.
Better get that coffee out of your hands.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Boom.
Nailed it.
Mm-hmm. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, and Jacob Lockham.
Thanks, guys.
And a shout out to Stephen S., who boosted his pledge.
Awesome.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Become a patron by visiting patreon.com/Tolkien Road. Doing so gets you cool perks like 20% off of everything at truemythspress.com. So books, my books, t-shirt for the Tolkien Road, and much more eventually. So kind of stalled out there with the t-shirt edition. We work slowly here on the Tolkien Road. We're in like.
We are perfectionists.
That's right.
And we don't like to be hasty.
Plus, your financial support helps the Tolkien Road to keep on evering on. Learn more at patreon.com/Tolkien Road. Hey, YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, just listen. Hey, head on over to YouTube real quick and just check out the video. And while you're at it, just subscribe to our channel, right? Even if you prefer to listen, just subscribe to our channel, because, like everybody has a YouTube account these days. All right. Ready to talk about this chapter, Greta?
Yes.
All right. Well, here's the Tolkien quote of the week. From chapter 9. Yavanna spoke before the Valar, saying, "The light of the trees has passed away and lives now only in the Silmarils of Fëanor. Foresighted was he. Even for those who are mightiest under Ilúvatar, there is some work that they may accomplish once and only once. The light of the trees I brought into being, and within Ea I can do so never again. Yet had I but a little of that light, I could recall life to the trees ere their roots decay. And then our hurt should be healed, and the malice of Melkor be confounded." So there's the rub, right? Give the Silmarils, use the light of the Silmarils, and we may be able to save the trees, right? That's what Yavanna says. So we'll see how that works out.
Yep. Puts the fate of the trees in Fëanor's hands.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So chapter 9 brings us to the terrible aftermath of Valinor's darkening. Will Melkor be held to account? Can Ungoliant be stopped? And is there any saving the two trees? And what of the Silmarils? Those are the big questions. In chapter 9, we'll learn of Melkor's escape, of the dreadful oath of Fëanor, of the Kinslaying, and much more. So as with each episode, we won't be covering every detail of this chapter, but instead doing our best to hit the high points and unpack interesting and important details. By the way, this is a dense chapter, so we're really not going to hit all the details, right? Doing my best here, but trying to keep it in one episode. I think last time when we did this originally, we did it in 2 or 3 episodes. Really any of the chapters in the Silmarillion could take up like multiple hours, right? But we're trying to keep it kind of, to an hour or a little more. And you guys, if you got other things you want to mention, you want to discuss, send us correspondence, drop comments on this episode on YouTube. It's a great way to continue the conversation over there. So please do that. All right. Well, as we've been doing, I wanted to say, so the timeline, where we are in the timeline of, this period of Middle Earth's history. So according to volume 10, can you hand me that, Greta, just so I can show everybody? So volume 10 of the History of Middle Earth has I think what is about the best timeline we've got for the early part of the Silmarillion right here, Morgoth's Ring. And so basically this takes place between Year of the Trees 1495 and 1497. I think a lot of it probably takes place in 1495, and then the journey, it would seem the journey of the Noldor takes about 2 years of the trees, or 20 of our own sun years, 20 of our normal sun years, right? So that seems to be what Tolkien indicates from the timeline given here, and so those are, we're estimating because of the year of the tree markers, so it might be a little bit less than that in terms of our sun years, but that's where this falls out in terms of the timeline, which is interesting to think about because it all happens very quickly in this chapter, right? We've gone from being like lots of stage setting, lots of like, lots of things that are like in the first several chapters, which just cover a lot of ground and like tell, of like different things happening over long periods of time. And then all of a sudden we've got a lot of action in the last few chapters. And so it can seem in this chapter like it's all happening like that, but it actually takes it would seem that it takes the Noldor, a good several of our own years to make their journey to the far north of Aman, right? Of that western continent. So that's interesting to think about because, we just think about, it's like, it seems to take place quickly, but there might've been a lot more going on that's just not written about. So anyway, all right. So can the trees be saved? That's the big thing, right? The trees, they were attacked by Melkor and Ungoliant. Ungoliant seemed to have poisoned them and sucked all the light out of them, right? She hungered for the light. And so that's, and of course, Melkor started it all by stabbing the trees, right? To their core, right? Like kind of to the very hearts of the trees. And so, the light seems to have gone out of them, right? So is there any salvaging them? So that's where we kind of pick up this chapter. Greta, do you want to read this passage right here?
You just read it.
Well, that's true. So maybe we'll just discuss it. Yeah. So we just read it. It was the quote of the week. But so basically we learn that the Silmarils contain the only light from the trees that's left, right? Remember, they contain the blended light of the two trees. And so Yavanna's like, if I can get that light, I might be able to heal the two trees, right? I might be able to save them, right? Otherwise, I can't do this. And so we're in this precarious position where there's, Yavanna's basically like, there's some things that, like, no matter what powers I've been given, I'm only able to do certain things once.
And is that because of the amount of herself that was put into them, do you think? Or is that just Ilúvatar's way of limiting their power?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't get real explicit to say so, right? I mean, I have to think that it has something to do with it's Ilúvatar's will, right? That in some way it is Ilúvatar saying there's certain things that can only be done once, right? And
especially something so great,
right,
as that,
right?
Yeah.
And that limit is put onto all creatures, like, is a consequence of free will, right? It's like, even in the scheme of like, and obviously Yavanna has done nothing wrong here, so it's not like we're saying like she's done something wrong, this causes, but in the grand scheme of like how we all operate together as creatures with free will, right? Like, there are certain things, like, you can't, like, there are just certain things you can't undo, right?
Yeah.
Noise here, trying to fix this. There's certain things you just can't undo, and that doesn't mean that there can't be a way to move forward, and there can't be reconciliation, and there can't be a way to like put the past behind you. But it's like, once you've killed somebody, right, you can't undo killing them, right? Now, that's not to say, like, of course, as Christians, we believe in resurrection, right? But that's not something that we can do under our own power, right? That's something that can only be granted by the gift of God, right? So I might do something, one of us might do something truly awful, right? One of us might kill somebody else, and then realize, like, later on, like, oh my gosh, I did such a horrible thing. I'm so sorry. And we might even be able to realize forgiveness from the people who love that other person who we harmed, right? But there's, in some sense, no undoing that, right? Like, you've done the thing, and all you can do at this point is trust in the forgiveness from the other people, and hope for the forgiveness from the other people, and trust in the forgiveness of God, right? Yeah. And how does that apply to this situation? Well, I think it's just, again, I think it's just the limits that Ilúvatar, God, places upon reality, so that there is this like perspective of like learning from our consequences, right? Like, that like the consequences of some of our actions are hard lessons to learn, right? Or they're really hard lessons to learn.
It's interesting here too that it would be possible, it seems like, for Yavanna to give these trees new life with the cooperation of Fëanor.
Right.
You know, I mean,
great point.
Thank you. That working together, you know, I mean, I think we've talked about this previously about the will that Ilúvatar has for this community to be one and to, you know, and to function as a family almost, and in cooperation with each other's gifts. That's what could bring the tree back to life, would be the Valar and the Noldor, you know, Fëanor being an Noldor working together. So it would take that, you know, it would take the will of both of them together.
That is a great point. That's probably the real thing that, like, you know, I was kind of like setting state, like just kind of thinking like notionally, but like I think you put this into very concrete terms about, you know, like why we maybe see this. This is Fëanor's opportunity to choose his destiny, right? Like this, it really is. And of course, we're going to find out that he really wouldn't have had the opportunity because they get stolen before he's able to even get back to Formenos. But before he even knows that, he decides against it, right? He like basically decides, I'm not going to cooperate, right?
It could have been a way for him to atone for.
Well,
for what?
Yes, and to the extent too that he played a part in setting the stage for something like this to happen.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And not to say that he wanted this to happen to the two trees, but that sometimes we do things and there are consequences further down the road that we contributed to indirectly, right? By kind of our attitudes, right? Or the things that we do. Gosh, that's a really hard lesson. That's a really hard lesson to, you know, to grasp and to kind of finally parse, like, where does your responsibility lie? But ultimately, this is like an opportunity for Fëanor almost to lay down his life, right? To lay down his own wants and to heal. Like, how amazing would it have been if he had said, you can have the Silmarils, right? None of the rest of the chapter, like all of the rest of the history, would have gone completely differently.
Yeah. Story wouldn't have been as interesting.
Well, it might not have been as well, but Melkor, you know, he still escapes even with Fëanor not doing this, right? So what might have happened otherwise, right?
That's true.
So that is a great, I mean, I'm really glad you drew that out, because I think that you really clarified like what the significance of this
ask is. I mean, that it was a huge, it was a huge ask for sure. Yeah, but it could have changed the course of all of their histories.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't you read this next passage right here of Fëanor's response?
Can we first just comment real quick? I know we're keeping this high level, but I just thought it was really cool that Aule says, "Don't be hasty."
Oh, don't be hasty. Be not hasty.
I think that's the first time we hear those words.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Very. Well, you know, it's like, I wouldn't think Treebeard would want to learn much from Aule, because Aule, of course, you know, is the guy who made the, you know, it was like, they will have need of wood, but apparently, you know,
they have a little something.
Apparently, they think alike in certain ways. So
apparently, yeah. All right. So Fëanor's response. But Fëanor spoke then and cried bitterly, "For the less even as for the greater, there is some deed that he may accomplish but once only, and in that deed his heart shall rest. It may be that I can unlock my jewels, but never again shall I make their like. And if I must break them, I shall break my heart, and I shall be slain. First of all the Eldar in Aman. Keep going. Not the first, said Mondos, but they did not understand his word, and again there was silence while Fëanor brooded in the dark. It seemed to him that he was beset in a ring of enemies, and the words of Melkor returned to him, saying that the Silmarils were not safe if the Valar would possess them. And is he not Vala, as are they? Said his thought. And does he not understand their heart? Yea, a thief shall reveal thieves. Then he cried aloud, this thing I will not do of free will, but if the Valar will constrain me, then shall I know indeed that Melkor is of their kindred. Then Mondos said, thou hast spoken. And Nienna arose and went up onto Ilúvatar and cast back her gray hood, and with her tears washed away the defilements of Ungoliant. and she sang in mourning for the bitterness of the world and the marring of Arda.
So yeah, so I mean, so basically Fëanor lands, he kind of considers it, and he basically says like, well, you guys sound an awful lot like Melkor right now, right? You know, he considers it at first, and then he's like, but this will kill me. And he says, I won't do it of my free will. So he says no. You know, he says no. He knows that the Valar can do it if they want to, but he says no. So that's where he lands. And we have this foreboding little comment from Mondos, like not the first, right? To be slain.
What is, oh, was that like,
that was a comment, I think, about what was happening to Fenway.
Gotcha.
Right at the moment.
Okay, that's what I was
of course,
wondering.
I kind of think like, does it allude to Fëanor's mother too, right? To Miriel, because she of course did, you know, I think it's right to say she was slain in childbirth, right? She died in childbirth, but
yeah,
or in the bearing of Fëanor, but yeah, so yeah, he basically says no, I'm not going to cooperate in all of this, and that's his answer.
And you know, when I first read this, I kind of like, I had sympathy for him. Like I think it's easy to see where he's coming from. And I mean, am I saying it was the right decision? I mean, I'm not one to cast judgment, but I feel like he, you know, his reasons are selfish indeed, but I think they're sympathetic as well. I mean, we talked about again how much of himself he put into those Silmarils, and like you said, it truly would be a laying down of his life. I mean, he even says that he's like, if I do this, I'm going to be slain. And that's a hard call for anybody to make. Right?
Well, and it's interesting, like if he had been willing, would the Valar have actually gone through with it? Right?
That's
like, because
question.
If they say like, well, he is going to be slain, and would they say like, well, the life of one of the children of Ilúvatar is not worth, you know, is worth more than the life of the two trees, right? Now you might make the argument that like, well, they're not directly killing him, right? Because they're trying to get the light from these. So maybe they can do something like, you know, it's almost like surgery to give, you know, to give life to someone else. I mean, it's kind of similar. I know a guy who recently gave like part of his liver to his you know, to his mother-in-law, and you know, we were kind of thinking about like the, you know, the ins and outs of how that, like the more like kind of the moral weighing of those things. And I have no indication that for this guy it was anything but like, of course I'll do it, but which is awesome. But you know, this is of course thousands of years ago, and the Valar would then have to weigh like, okay, is it really worth it that we might lose Fëanor, that we might lose one of the children of Ilúvatar? Because in their mind, it's like, this is not one of our creations. This is one of Ilúvatar's own blessed children, right? You know, this isn't something that really Ilúvatar has given us the ability to decide. He has not given us the ability to decide the fate of. So it's like, can we indirectly will it? You know, like, because we need the light and we're going to do our best to keep him alive. Of course we can't like kill him, right? But anyway, so these are all just like, it's interesting questions to weigh here. And I think the thing that really matters ultimately is that Fëanor says no, right? He just says, no, I will not.
It just shows the state of his heart.
But and we know like there's like great, you know, greater love hath no one than to lay down his life for his friends, right? Like, you know, that's kind of paraphrasing the biblical passage, but and I mean, even greater for his enemies, right? So you know, there's something there's true heroism in knowing that it could kill you and laying down your life, right? And laying down your life nevertheless for the sake of something, right? I think of the classic example of somebody, you know, a soldier jumping on a grenade to absorb the blow, you know, for his comrades, right? Or doing some heroic act to save the life of his comrades, knowing that he'll probably die, right? You know, those kinds of things are amazing heroic deeds. And, you know, when they, you know, who knows when any of us is going to be faced with doing something like that in some form or fashion. So anyway, I just think it's clear here that Fëanor makes a decision, and it's like to the very inmost part of his soul, and chooses a path. And not only is he like, no, I won't do it, but he's like, and I see right through all you Valar. I don't trust you anymore. Yeah. Right. Which I think is ultimately what Melkor really wanted.
Yeah. I mean, he succeeded there for sure. Real quick, I thought it was interesting here when it talks about Nienna, and we've already discussed the connection between Nienna and Gandalf. But I think I thought it was cool here that mentioned that Nienna has a gray hood.
Like that is
Gandalf.
cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice little detail there.
Yeah. I thought that was cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe Gandalf was participating in helping her clean up, right?
It's true.
You know, maybe he was doing something to help.
Possible.
Yeah. Interesting thought.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, next we catch up with Melkor. So read this passage here. But Melkor also was there, and he came to the house of Fëanor, and there he slew Finwë, king of the Noldor, before his doors, and spilled the first blood in the blessed realm, for Finwë alone had not fled from the horror of the dark. And they told that Melkor had broken the stronghold of Formenos and taken all the jewels of the Noldor that were hoarded in that place, and the Silmarils were gone. So Melkor and Ungoliant, they go north and they hit Formenos. Formenos is not being guarded because Fëanor is at the festival, and in Valmar. So Melkor slays Finwë, right? Finwë, the High King of the Noldor, the father of Fëanor, the father of Fingolfin, the father of Finarfin, and then he steals all the jewels, including the Silmarils that are hoarded up there. All right, Greta, do you want to read this about Fëanor's response to this news?
Yep. Then Fëanor rose, and lifting up his hand before Manwë, he cursed Melkor, naming him Morgoth, the black foe of the world. And by that name only was he known to the Eldar ever after. And he cursed also the summons of Manwë and the hour in which he came to Tanaquil, thinking in the madness of his rage and grief that had he been at Formenos, his strength would have availed more than to be slain also, as Melkor had proposed.
Had purposed.
Oh, had purposed. Yep, that's that word is. Then Fëanor ran from the Ring of Doom and fled into the night, for his father was dearer to him than the light of Valinor or the peerless works of his hands, and who among sons of elves or men have held their fathers of greater worth?
Yeah, so you really feel for Fëanor because he truly loved his father, right? And and so Melkor has slain his father. So, and the other note we get, of course, is how Melkor's name came to be Morgoth, right? How he came to have that name instead of Melkor, and really Morgoth is the name he's going to be known as for the rest of, really the rest of the Silmarillion. Melkor might arise a couple more times, but it's really Morgoth that is the name that's used for him, which means the black foe of the world. So,
it's pretty dark.
Yeah. Well, yeah, very dark.
Yeah, inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So, once again with Melkor, of course, Melkor is with Ungoliant, and part of the reason they got these jewels, Melkor wanted the Silmarils, and he promised Ungoliant that he would give her all of this stuff. She would help him in his deed, right? So this is going to lead to a little conflict between Melkor and Ungoliant. All right, so read this passage. Together they went on, for Morgoth could not elude Ungoliant, and her cloud was still about him, and all her eyes were upon him. And they came to those lands that lay north of the firth of Drengist. Now Morgoth was drawing near to the ruins of Angband, where his great western stronghold had been. And Ungoliant perceived his hope, and knew that here he would seek to escape from her, and she stayed him, demanding that he fulfill his promise. Blackheart, she said, I have done thy bidding, but I hunger still. What wouldst thou have more, said Morgoth. Dost thou desire all the world for thy belly? I did not vow to give thee that. I am its lord. Not so much, said Ungoliant, but thou hast a great treasure from Formenos. I will have all that, yea, with both hands thou shalt give it. Then perforce Morgoth surrendered to her the gems that he bore with him, one by one and grudgingly, and she devoured them, and their beauty perished from the world. Huger and darker yet grew Ungoliant, but her lust was unsated. With one hand thou givest, she said, with the left only. Open thy right hand. In his right hand, Morgoth held close the Silmarils, and though they were locked in a crystal casket, they had begun to burn him, and his hand was clenched in pain, but he would not open it. Nay, he said, thou hast had thy due, for with my power that I put into thee, thy work was accomplished. I need thee no more. These things thou shalt not have nor see. I name them unto myself forever. So he gives her all the jewels, and except for the Silmarils, and the Silmarils isn't even starting to burn him now because right, they're pretty holy, and of course he's not so holy, and so they're starting to really cause him a problem at that point. I do want to mention, so where they are right now, they've actually gone so far north, that they have reached the point where Amon and Balerion connect. It's kind of like at the very far north of the world, right? And so they've passed back into the northwest of Balerion, right, in the very far northwest, and so that's the location they find themselves in when they have this argument, and then they get into a fight. They get into a fight, and Balrogs come to the rescue for Melkor, because otherwise it seems like Ungoliant was about to whoop him. So, all right, Greta, do you want to read this passage?
I just want to say real quick, it was interesting to me that I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but it was interesting to me that Melkor, or Morgoth, I guess, was trying to get rid of Ungoliant. Like, it just shows that he just completely used her.
Oh yeah,
obviously, we knew that, but that just shows that he's trying to elude her and he's trying to get away from her, but her cloud just continues to envelop him. Just follow him wherever he goes.
Well, it's interesting to think. I'm glad you brought that up. It's interesting to kind of think about the parallel of Melkor and Ungoliant in this chapter, and Fëanor and the rest of the Noldor, and towards the end of this chapter as well, right? They both kind of pull that same deed, right? They kind of use their cohorts, their co-conspirators, and only insofar as they feel like they need them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And once they've gotten what they want, they really treat them like garbage. So anyway, yeah, good point.
Yeah, it's really just the effect of evil and sin, right? It just consumes them.
Yeah.
But Ungoliant had grown great, and he less, by the power that had gone out of him. And she rose against him, and her cloud closed about him, and she enmeshed him in a web of clinging thongs to strangle him. Then Morgoth sent forth a terrible cry that echoed in the mountains. Therefore that region was called Lamoth, for the echoes of his voice dwelt there ever after, so that any who cried aloud in that land awoke them, and all the waste between the hills and the sea was filled with the clamor as of voices in anguish. The cry of Morgoth in that hour was the greatest and most dreadful that was ever heard in the northern world. The mountains shook and the earth trembled and rocks were riven asunder. Deep in forgotten places that cry was heard. Far beneath the ruined halls of Angband, and vaults to which the Valar in the haste of their assault had not descended, Balrogs lurked still, awaiting ever the return of their lord. And now swiftly they arose, and passing over Hithlum, they came to Lamoth as a tempest of fire. With their whips of flame, they smote asunder the webs of Ungoliant, and she quailed and turned to flight, belching black vapors to cover her. And fleeing from the north, she went down into Balerion and dwelt beneath Erad Gorgoroth, in that dark valley that was after called
Nan Dungorthib,
the Valley of Dreadful Death, because of the horror that she bred there. For other foul creatures of spider form had dwelt there since the days of the delving of Angband, and she mated with them and devoured them. And even after Ungoliant herself departed and went whither she would into the forgotten south of the world, her offspring abode there and wove their hideous webs of the fate of Ungoliant. Wove their hideous webs of the fate of Ungoliant. No tale tells. Yet some have said that she ended long ago, when in her uttermost famine she devoured herself at last.
Yeah, so this is kind of the last we hear from we know of for sure from Ungoliant. It's her origin and her end are both kind of shrouded in mystery. But it's just lots of interesting stuff in this passage. Morgoth, first of all, is he does all of this evil, right? More and more of his power is like passing out of him, and so he's diminishing, right? He's actually becoming less powerful as all of this happens. It's like the more he uses his will and his power for evil, the less of it he has, right? Which is a really just interesting little note there.
It's just the toll that evil takes on our spirits, right? And I was realizing what an incredible villain Tolkien has created in Ungoliant, because I was reading this passage, I was actually rooting for Morgoth. I was like, get her, kill her.
Yeah, well, it says, I mean, he's genuinely terrified, right? It
Yes.
says,
Yeah.
his then Morgoth sent forth a terrible cry. It's just this picture of like, oh my gosh, what have I created? You know, it's
Mhm.
like, I this got
Mhm.
much worse than I ever expected it to. It's like, you know,
Mhm.
it's just the kind of classic picture of somebody, you know, creating that monster that they think they can control, and eventually it just gets out of hand, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's,
Mhm.
you know, and this is Morgoth we're talking about, you know,
Yeah.
the supposedly the greatest of all, you know, the biggest villain in all of Middle Earth, and he creates this
Right.
monster, you know, that is not, that goes even further than what he intended. And he literally needs help from the Balrogs, right? From the Balrogs who still dwell in Angband, right? In the ruined halls of Angband.
Mhm.
You know, so it, man, if something would ever be like a really like just cool visual to have depicted, you know, with like cool special effects, it would be like the Balrogs, like this army of Balrogs coming to the rescue of Morgoth against Ungoliant, right? Like this giant, like just hideous
I
spider
think that would be
creature.
terrifying
It would be
to
awesome too.
behold.
It'd be
It would be awesome and absolutely terrifying.
it would be awesome and
I think
terrifying
I'd be
at the same
watching it
time.
like this.
Yeah, it would be like demons versus giant spider demon.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
wow.
Evil versus more evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eviler. Yeah.
So but it, you know, but Ungoliant, yeah, she just keeps getting like bigger and like just hungrier, like the more she
Mhm.
devours, right?
And what a terrible, terrible end.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to think that she died consuming herself
Mhm.
because she was just could not be satiated otherwise.
Right.
I mean, ugh, like, there's no words to describe just how yucky that is.
Yeah, awful to think about.
Yeah.
So you know, it's one of those, again, like she's very much this creature that feels like it, you know, she would be right at home in Dante's Inferno, you know, like
Yes. Yep.
just, you
For
know,
sure.
the idea of like devouring oneself, right?
In the level like closest to hell.
Yeah.
Like she would be down there.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
All right. So oh yeah, well, and also obviously she goes and she finds these other like kind of giant spiders in this forest. And so this forest is actually the Valley of Dreadful Death is going to come back up later in the Silmarillion. One of the characters spends some time there. And it's a, you know, truly terrifying place. But you know, she goes there and she finds all these other foul creatures of spider form. It's interesting that it says foul creatures of spider form, because again, it makes you think like maybe they're other just like lesser Maiar who took this. They were also corrupted by Melkor, and they took this form. You know, they took this form. You know,
This
because
could be where
it doesn't just say they're giant spiders. It says they are foul creatures of spider form. Right.
And this could very well be where Shelob, like one of them could possibly be
right.
Shelob.
Right, and that's the thing. And so we also think of like the giant spiders in Mirkwood and the Hobbit, right? That maybe they are somehow descended from, you know, from all of this. So
yeah.
But yeah, so you know, Ungoliant with these other spiders and non Dungortheb. And that's where maybe all these rest of these giant spiders that are in a lot of the other Tolkien stories come from. All right. So yeah, so back. Oh, I'm sorry. So not back, but let's read this next passage. Greta, can you actually I'll read this one because you read the last one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you all the ones that have hard words to pronounce.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thus the fear of Yavanna that the Silmarils would be swallowed up and fall into nothingness did not come to pass, but they remained in the power of Morgoth. And he, being freed, gathered again all his servants that he could find and came to the ruins of Angband. There he delved anew his vast vaults and dungeons, and above their gates he reared the threefold peaks of Thangorodrim, and a great reek of dark smoke was ever wreathed about them. There, countless became the host of his beasts and his demons, and the race of the orcs, spread long before, grew and multiplied in the bowels of the earth. Dark now fell the shadow on Beleriand, as is told hereafter. But in Angband, Morgoth forged for himself a great crown of iron, and he called himself king of the world. In token of this, he set the Silmarils in his crown. His hands were burned black by the touch of those hallowed jewels, and black they remained ever after. Nor was he ever free from the pain of the burning and the anger of the pain. That crown he never took from his head, though its weight became a deadly weariness. Never but once only did he depart for a while secretly from his domain in the north. Seldom indeed did he leave the deep places of his fortress, but governed his armies from his northern throne. And once only also did he himself wield weapon while his realm lasted. So he takes up his throne in Angband, which is in the far north of Beleriand. It actually doesn't show up on the map that's included in the Silmarillion, but you just kind of like wherever, like the top part of the map, right? It's just Angband is just right above there. I'll try to remember to link to some interesting maps that others have done of what this might look like. But basically, you've got Angband, which is which is kind of this big dungeon, right? That existed, right? That's existed for a long time. It was kind of in ruins, but he rebuilds it, and then he builds Thangorodrim, which is the threefold peaks, right? It's these mountains that are above it, right? So you kind of think of like, Sauron has Mount Doom. Well, Morgoth has three mountains, right? Mm-hmm. Right there. In the far north of Beleriand, and he starts doing a lot of evil. Really, like, again, another picture like worthy of Dante's Inferno of like what like power when one wants to assert themselves to be king of the world, right? What that power grab does to a person, right? Like, it's not actually something that's rewarded. It's a very ugly picture of all that means, right? His hands are burned from the Silmarils. He's never free from the pain of their burning and the anger of the pain. He never takes the crown off his head, but it becomes a deadly weariness to him. And he never really leaves the fortress because he's getting weaker and weaker, right? Mm-hmm. All of his power has gone into his perverted creations, right? Or just perverted subcreations. And so he's really not he's not in a happy place, but he's got what he wanted, right? Which is to be, well, in his mind, the king of the world, right?
King of the world. Yeah. And it's I feel like this crown is described as a deadly weariness. I mean, that's exactly what the ring becomes, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone they desire it, but it obviously has terrible effects on those who carry it. And I also just found myself thinking with this whole situation here, like, this really is kind of a catch-22, because it would have been terrible for the Silmarils to have been swallowed up, right, and been gone forever. Like, that would have been terrible. Mm-hmm. But it's also terrible that Morgoth has them. So it's kind of like, well, is it better that they're still around and Morgoth has them? Or is it, or would it have been better for Ungoliant to just consumed them and been done with them? Like, you think about the ring being destroyed in the eternal fire, or the fire of Mount Doom, right? And if Ungoliant had swallowed these, right, and then she kind of like consumed herself, which would have consumed the Silmarils as well.
I don't think she would have been able to consume them, though, based on what happens later on. I don't think
just because of the power.
I think she would have consumed them, and they would have like basically burned her insides, like from the inside out, right?
So you don't think even her swallowing them would have destroyed them? Mm-mm. Okay.
Nope.
That's probably true.
And that's based on what we'll see in later chapters. Okay. That happens when people, when certain creatures actually, one creature actually does swallow one, right? Mm-hmm. And we see what happens to that creature. So, I think we had a good point, and then I just lost my train of thought. But I was going to say, okay, yeah. So it's interesting. It's a really interesting juxtaposition between the One Ring and the Silmarils, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like the Silmarils are more like the Elvish rings, right? They're like almost like they correspond to the Elvish rings, and that the One Ring is actually, it's almost like if you took, like, in the case of the Silmarils, if you took the will of Morgoth towards the Silmarils and put them into, and kind of created a talisman from them, right? Like created like an object from that will, right? That's what the One Ring is. Like it's that will to have power over like what is good, and like, over what is good and should not be under your power, right? And so the three Silmarils, I feel like, are more akin because they were created with like a good purpose. Like there's not like the One Ring was created with like a pretty foul purpose, right? Yeah. The three Elven rings were actually created with a purpose that matched what elves want to do, which is to preserve what's good in the world, right?
Yeah, it's a very good point.
So so I think there's similarities and differences between the three Silmarils and the One Ring, right?
Yeah, I think
I
that's
think
true.
similarities in that people seem to want them and drawn to them and want to lay hold of them, and different in that the Silmarils seem to be good objects, right? And they actually, we'll see what happens to them later on in the story, but whereas the One Ring does not seem to have much of a good purpose at all, right? The only one who seems to be able to wield it successfully is Sauron, without harming themselves.
Right. Yeah. So Fëanor was able to have the Silmarils without them having this effect on him, right? So it's clearly that Morgoth is not intended to have them, and it's his lust and greed and desire for power, is why he has them, and that's really, I think, what's causing the bad effects, right? It's just he's not entitled to them. He doesn't, he stole them for evil purposes.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think you're right. Well, so that we're going to leave off from Morgoth there. So he's back in Angband, back on his throne, pretending to be king of the world. And
I always think of Titanic when I hear that.
Kind of like old Leo DiCaprio on the front of the Titanic, right?
See, like we're right the there. King of the world. Yeah, I know. I was like, I just, every time I hear that phrase, I just can't not hear that and see that. It's in my
impossible
head.
Now. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to go back, and there's a lot more in this chapter. So we're going to go back to the Blessed Realm, and we're going to catch up with Fëanor and the Noldor. And so basically Fëanor has decided he wants no more of the Blessed Realm. He thinks that it was all a ruse, and that the Valar brought them there with foul purpose. And he is trying to communicate this to everybody, to all the rest of the Noldor, and convince them to come with him back to the place they began, right? So let's see, Greta, why don't we just switch off? This is a little longer, so why don't we switch off on paragraphs here? So you want to start with the first one?
Sure. Why, O people of the Noldor, Fëanor cried, why should we longer serve the jealous Valar, who cannot keep us, nor even their own realm, secure from their enemy? And though he be now their foe, are not they and he of one kin? Vengeance calls me hence, but even were it otherwise, I would not dwell longer in the same land with the kin of my father's slayer and of the thief of my treasure. Yet I am not the only valiant in this valiant people. And have ye not all lost your king? And what else have ye not lost, cooped here in a narrow land between the mountains and the sea?
Here once was light, that the Valar begrudged to Middle Earth, but now dark levels all. Shall we mourn here deedless forever, a shadow folk, mist haunting, dropping vain tears in the thankless sea? Or shall we return to our home? In Quiviane and sweet ran the waters under unclouded stars, and wide lands lay about, where a free people might walk. There they lie still and await us, who in our folly forsook them. Come away, let the cowards keep this city.
Long he spoke, and ever he urged the Noldor to follow him, and by their own prowess to win freedom in great realms in the lands of the east before it was too late. For he echoed the lies of Melkor, that the Valar had cozened them and would hold them captive so that men might rule in Middle-earth. Many of the Eldar heard then for the first time of the aftercomers. Fair shall the end be, he cried, though long and hard shall be the road. Say farewell to bondage, but say farewell also to ease. Say farewell to the weak. Say farewell to your treasure. More still shall we make. Journey light, but bring with you your swords. For we will go further than Orome, endure longer than Tolkis. We will never turn back from pursuit. After Morgoth to the ends of the earth. War shall he have, and hatred undying. But when we have conquered and have regained the Silmarils, then we and we alone shall be lords of the unsullied light and masters of the bliss and beauty of Arda. No other race shall oust us.
Yeah, so basically Fëanor's like, hey, let's go back to Quiviane, right? We were much happier there, right? Now here's the thing. Fëanor was born in the Blessed Realm, I believe. All right. So this is a really interesting thing. So for him, I believe Quiviane was now maybe I'm misreading this, but I believe that that he was, right? So actually we need to figure out the truth of this. He was born in Valinor, right? So I'm looking, yeah. So this is on the Lord of the Rings one wiki to rule them all. Fëanor was born in Valinor, so he's never actually been to Cuiviénen, right? All he knows is Cuiviénen from what he has heard from others, right? Which is a really interesting note, right?
Where was he exiled? In Formanos? Where is that?
That's in the north of Aman, right? So it's north of Valinor. So it's still on the west. It's still on the far west, the blessed continent, the Western continent, right? Although many parts of it aren't very blessed, but anyway, yeah, it was definitely not in Balerion or anywhere east of that.
Okay.
But that's where he wants to lead everybody, right? So he wants to go back there. He's convinced that that whatever reason they were here, it was not a good one. Actually, he goes, it's really interesting. He says, like, they want to give this land to men, right? They want to give this land to the aftercomers, right? The land that should have been ours, right? That was ours once and should be ours still, right? And you're kind of like, well, there actually are elves still back there, right? That still do live back there. But I guess he doesn't know that. They've been in the Blessed Realm for a long time, and that's all Fëanor actually knows from experience. So, anyway, that's something that it doesn't actually draw out in the text, but it's an interesting thing to remember, right? That he doesn't actually know Cuiviénen firsthand, only from what he's been told, probably by his father, right? And others who once were there.
That's a great point.
But he wants to lead them back there, and which is way further east than Balerion, right? So, which is interesting to keep in mind that his goal was to take them to Cuiviénen, and we'll find out that he never actually delivers on that promise, right? He never actually, that's maybe his thing is I got to get the Silmarils before we get to Cuiviénen, but he never actually, accomplishes that. So
you can't help but be sympathetic to him, though. I mean, I feel like. He's suffered a lot, right? And he's got a point. Like, the Valar have not been able to protect him or his kin or his precious jewel. Like, they've kind of failed him.
Yeah.
For being completely honest, they have. And again, I know we've talked about them being kind of young and naive still and growing and into their roles as the protector of the Eldar, but I feel like I find myself being very sympathetic to him here. I can't say that I wouldn't feel the same way. Why would I want to stay here among people who have failed to kind of fulfill some of their promises that they've made?
Well, especially if you don't remember what it was like, what it was actually like, right? You don't remember the days when Melkor was over there and there are all these other foul creatures in that area and you're kind of like, we're running to escape them, right? He doesn't have his father here to correct him, like to be like, look, son, I know you think it would be great to be back there, but trust me, it's not as great as you think. Like, it's much better over here.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. Cause he wouldn't have been around there that time.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a lot in that speech. Fëanor is obviously a pretty gifted orator. And he definitely rouses a good bit of his brethren, Noldoran brethren, to his cause.
Yep.
So then Fëanor swore a terrible oath. His 7 sons leapt straight away to his side and took the selfsame vow together, and red as blood shone their drawn swords in the glare of the torches. They swore an oath which none shall break and none should take, by the name even of Ilúvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them if they kept it not. And Manwë they named in witness, and Varda, and the hallowed mountain of Taniquetil, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world Vala, demon, elf, or man as yet unborn, or any creature, great or small, good or evil, that time should bring forth unto the end of days, whoso should hold or take or keep a Silmaril from their possession. So this is Fëanor's oath. The oath is that the Silmarils belong to me and my sons. Anybody else who takes them, we're going to come for them, right? Right. That's basically where it stands. And this is, again, the cause of and it's not just like take them, but like it's almost like stand between us and the Silmarils, right? You better not stand between us.
Yeah.
So you just see where Fëanor, like where he has gone, right? Like where his heart has gone in all this, right? He has gone from maybe being on the point of like truly reconciling and coming back into the good graces of the Valar, and he has just been like, I'm done with the Valar, and anybody who gets between me and the Silmarils is toast, right? I will end them, right? So we just kind of get this picture of where Fëanor's heart is at this point.
And again, it's kind of, you can't help but think of the ring here, right? I mean, people are, from Lord of the Rings, that people are willing to go to incredible lengths to keep that ring or to get it back.
Yeah.
Just because of the hold it takes on their heart. Yeah. Exactly.
There's an interesting note here. So we get kind of a passage about everybody who decides to go with Fëanor, and basically it's most of the Noldor, right? So obviously Fingolfin, right? Fingolfin and Finarfin do not want to go. And Torgon speaks against Fëanor, Torgon being one of Fingolfin's sons. But ultimately, most of their children between Fingolfin and Finarfin do want to go. And among them is Galadriel. So it says, do you want to read this passage about Galadriel?
Galadriel, the only woman of the Noldor to stand that day tall and valiant among the contending princes, was eager to be gone. No oath she swore, but the words of Fëanor concerning Middle-earth had kindled in her heart, for she yearned to see the wide, unguarded lands and to rule there a realm at her own will.
Yeah, so this is where, we haven't talked about the Rings of Power in a while, but this is where I'm kind of like, I can see Galadriel as a warrior.
Yeah.
Warrior she-elf.
I completely agree.
I think based on this and then other things that Tolkien has written about Galadriel outside of Lord of the Rings, there is a case to be made that she was, not only was she a like amazing, graceful, beautiful queen, right? But she was like a pretty strong warrior too. She had a pretty fiery heart and a strong, a kind of a strong warrior streak in her. So.
Yeah. And it describes her as valiant among, like, the only woman.
Yeah.
Right. And standing valiant among all these princes. I mean, you gotta have some self-confidence to stand valiant among princes.
That's right. That's right. So they depart north, kind of following the same general path that, or for the north, they depart for the north. And the idea is to go up to the far north and then find some way to cross over into Beleriand, like Melkor and Ungoliant did. And they proceed in two hosts. So really, the smaller one is Fëanor, and the larger one is Fingolfin, right? And the rest of the Noldor. The Fingolfin host is kind of like the Fëanor people are like, let's go, right? The Fingolfin people is kind of like a mixture of like some people who want to go and some people who are kind of like more hesitant about it and aren't as like, they're not really following Fëanor, but they're like, but what he said sounds kind of cool. Like it'd be cool to have our own lands over across the sea. Fingolfin ends up going because he's like, my sons are going. And Finarfin goes for the same reason, right? They're basically like, my people are going, so I'm going to go with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, there's these two groups, Fëanor, the smaller one, going faster, Fingolfin, the larger one, kind of lagging behind a little bit. One thing I wanted to say, and this was something I meant to bring up a couple passages ago. I cannot get out of my head that this feels like the Exodus in reverse. It's like, from the Bible, right? So it's like Fëanor is like the opposite of Moses here. It's like, he's leading the people out of the promised land into their like slavery, right? That as I was reading this, it just like felt very much, it's like he's the anti-Moses here,
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So anyway, do with that what you will. All right. So Greta, do you want to read so as they are, setting out for this from Tirion, right? The home city of the Noldor in the Blessed Realm. They get a visit from a herald of Manwë, from a messenger of Manwë. So Greta, do you want to read this passage from the messenger of Manwë?
But even as the trumpet sang and Fëanor issued from the gates of Tirion, a messenger came at last from Manwë, saying, against the folly of Fëanor shall be set my counsel only. Go not forth, for the hour is evil, and your road leads to sorrow that ye do not foresee. No aid will the Valar lend you in this quest, but neither will they hinder you. For this ye shall know, as ye came hither freely, freely shall ye depart. But thou, Fëanor, Finwë's son, by thine oath art exiled. The lies of Melkor thou shalt unlearn in bitterness. Vala he is, thou sayest. Then thou hast sworn in vain, for none of the Valar canst thou overcome now or ever within the halls of Ea, not through Eru, whom thou namest, had made thee thrice greater than thou art. But Fëanor laughed and spoke not to the herald, but to the Noldor, saying, So, then will this valiant people send forth the heir of their king alone into banishment with his sons only and return to their bondage? But if any will come with me, as I say to them, is sorrow foreboded to you? But in Aman we have seen it. In Aman we have come through bliss to woe. The other now we will try, through sorrow to find joy, or freedom at the least. Then turning to the herald, he cried, Say this to Manwë,
Sulimo.
High King of Arda. If Fëanor cannot overthrow Morgoth, at least he delays not to assail him and sits not idle in grief. And it may be that Eru has set in me a fire greater than thou knowest. Such hurt at the least will I do to the foe of the Valar, that even the mighty in the ring of doom shall wonder to hear it. Yea, in the end they shall follow me. Farewell.
Yes. So Fëanor is basically like, whatever, like we're going. And they Manwë tries to warn them through this herald, and it's and Fëanor is just not having it, right? Let's go.
And it's completely of his own free will, right? I mean, he says we're not gonna stop you, we're not gonna help you, but we're also not gonna stop you, right?
And he's basically like, hey, well, and then Fëanor's response is essentially like, you tell us we're only going to find sorrow over there. Well, we only have sorrow here at this point, right? So might as well try to find joy through the sorrow over in this other place, right? Where we came from. So that's the rationale there. Okay. Well, we jump forward next to the Kinslaying. Why is it moving forward? There we go. All right. So they're journeying, they're on their way, and they pass by Alqualande, and where of course the Teleri live, right? The Teleri have ships, and so they get into the Fëanor gets into his mind, wouldn't it be great if we had ships to actually make this crossing across the sea at some point, right? So that we don't have to go all the way to the north.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, Teleri, can you help us out? And of course, when they say no, because of course they're going to say no, what does that mean to Fëanor? Well, it means you're standing in the way of my oath. All right. And that's where we pick up. Thereupon, Fëanor left him and sat in dark thought beyond the walls of Alqualande until his host was assembled. When he judged that his strength was enough, he went to the haven of the swans and began to man the ships that were anchored there and to take them away by force. But the Teleri withstood him and cast many of the Noldor into the sea. Then swords were drawn and a bitter fight was fought upon the ships and about the lamplit quays and piers of the haven, and even upon the great arch of its gate. Thrice the people of Fëanor were driven back, and many were slain upon either side. But the vanguard of the Noldor was succored by Fingon with the foremost of the host of Fingolfin, who coming up found a battle joined in their own kin falling, and rushed in before they knew rightly the cause of the quarrel. Some thought indeed that the Teleri had sought to waylay the march of the Noldor at the bidding of the Valar. Thus at last the Teleri were overcome, and a great part of their mariners that dwelt in Alqualande were wickedly slain. For the Noldor would become fierce and desperate, and the Teleri had less strength, and they were armed for the most part, but with slender bows. Then the Noldor drew away their white ships and manned their oars as best they might, and rowed them north along the coast. And it goes on to say that even Olwe, the king of the Teleri, even tried to call upon Ase, right, the vassal of Ulmo, for aid, but the Valar won't, because they're not hindering the flight of the Noldor, right? They're not going to stop them, right? So this is the Kinslaying, right? Is the the shedding of blood between the Noldor and the Teleri, really caused by Fëanor, and then made worse because the second group of Noldor, the larger host, come up when the battle is already in progress, and they're just like, hey, you're beating up our brothers, right? You're killing our brothers, stop, right? And so they're not thinking like, wait, let's stop the fight. They're like, the Teleri are attacking us, thinking that the Valar are told the Teleri to stop them, right?
I think an important piece of context here too is that, and I don't think we necessarily read this, but who is Olwe,
Mm-hmm.
he describes their ships, right? These are not just any ordinary ships that Fëanor is asking for, right? I mean, these were basically the Teleri Silmarils,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Olwe describes them as, like, we put our heart and soul into building these, and our women like wove the sails, and like these are like, these are very precious to us. Like, we are in these ships. So not only is it like he's asking for like a old decrepit rowboat or something, like he's asking for these beautiful ships that the Teleri have put their hearts and souls into creating, right? And he doesn't think a thing of trying to steal them, right? And that just shows you, I think, just this how Fëanor's heart is just being completely, like, it's just been overtaken by greed and pride at this point, because he's willing to kill people to basically take their Silmarils, to get his own Silmarils.
Yeah.
It just makes me really mad.
Yeah. Well, I like your point about these ships, are effectively the Silmarils of the Teleri. I mean, sometimes a thing is the precious to you, and and it's rightfully so, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the precious to you in a good and proper way, and and so you don't blame the Teleri for trying to stop them, but I mean, the blame is certainly not upon them for what happens afterwards. It's just it's a tragedy, and it's all set in motion by Fëanor's will, right? It's like by Fëanor exerting his will and trying to make a certain thing happen, and what do you have? You have this, just what's forever known as the Kinslaying, right? And it's one of the great tragedies of Middle Earth, of the history of Middle Earth.
And I can't help but think that the Valar have took this no hindering thing just a bit too far here.
Yeah, well, just a bit.
Just a bit. I mean,
well, Fëanor, he's that spirit of fire, right? He just his spirit blazes within him, right? And so when he sets it in a certain place, he's like, I mean, we about the there's people, there are people like that, right? Where it's just like, once they have set their set to something, like, you better not stand in their way, right? And come hell or high water, they're going to do it, and there's almost no convincing them otherwise, right?
But this was clearly not a fair fight. I mean, it even says the Noldor had swords.
Oh no, I'm not defending him.
Had bows.
I'm not defending him. I'm not saying it was a fair fight. It's clearly not a fair fight.
But I'm just saying,
they
should have come to their aid. I mean,
meaning, I'm sorry, who should have come to their aid?
The Valar.
The Valar. You're mad at the Valar for not coming.
Yeah, I think they took this whole non-hindering thing way too far.
Yeah, I can see why you'd be upset by that. And I think it's, it's like, well, why wouldn't you have come to the aid of, like, defending, because it's like, and again, maybe it's the rationale. There is some sense in which all this escalated, right? So it doesn't actually say, like, Fëanor went in and started killing the Teleri to take their ships. It says he started manning their ships, right? And then the Teleri started casting the Noldor into the sea, right? And then swords were drawn. So it kind of escalates, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's just all a one-sided escalation either. Again, to me, the fault ultimately comes back to Fëanor and his sons.
Well, yeah.
But there is a sense in which, like, the Teleri play a little bit of a part in causing the escalation. Would it have been better for the Teleri just to say, you know what, take our ships? It's not worth it. It's not worth the shedding of your blood, right? And I think there's something to be said for that perspective, right? That, like, at some point, like, at what point is it truly right to, like, like, take somebody's life, even if they're doing evil, right? Even if it seems necessary to stop them from doing evil, right? To use the use of deadly force, right? that the Teleri don't necessarily. I mean, they throw. So maybe I don't know. Maybe the Noldor can't swim. So maybe that's part of the maybe that's part of the problem. It might be true.
I was going to
because,
say, very well might be true.
It might be true, but although they all grew up by supposedly grew up by Quevianians, so you think all elves should be able to, they grew up by this big lake, so they should all be able to swim, right? But anyway, it's a good point, and one I hadn't gone deeply into in my own mind. But there is a sense of like this whole thing escalating, and at some point it just, like all things that escalate, it gets out of control because no one puts an end to it. So
cool heads do not prevail,
right? And it's almost like this is like Fëanor is given so many opportunities to just stop himself and to check himself, right? To say like, okay, wait a minute, maybe I'm taking this thing too far. And he refuses to do that. He refuses to turn back. And I feel like what we said at the beginning of this chapter, right, with like that he could have laid down his life, right, he could have chosen a heroic path, right? Because a lot of times we're not given the opportunity to be like, you've either got to just maintain the status quo or lay down your life. It's like, or you've got to like just maintain the status quo. It's like either you lay down your life and you become a hero and save the day, right? Or you don't lay down your life and all these other bad things might happen, right? Sometimes that's the choice, right? So like it's not like lay down your life, and if you don't, well, it'll just be kind of the status quo. But if you lay down your life, it would be a hero. It's not usually that. Sometimes it's not that. It's like lay down your life or don't, and then bad things will happen, right? So yeah, this chapter is just so packed. And we've still a few more passages to go. All right. So they have one more warning before they finally just are gone. And this one, we don't know exactly who it comes from. It's another herald from Manwë, but it sounds like it may be Mondos, right? All right. So here it is. This is called the Prophecy of the North. Tears unnumbered you shall shed, and the Valar will fence Valinor against you and shut you out, so that not even the echo of the lamentation shall pass over the mountains. On the house of Fëanor, the wrath of the Valar lieth from the west unto the uttermost east, and upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. Their oaths shall drive them and yet betray them, and never snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. To evil end shall all things turn that they begin well, and by treason of kin unto kin, and the fear of treason shall this come to pass. The dispossessed shall they be forever. Ye have spilled the blood of your kindred and unrighteously and have stained the land of Aman. For blood ye shall render blood, and beyond Aman ye shall dwell in death's shadow. For though Eru appointed to you to die not in Ea, and no sickness may assail you, yet slain ye may be, and slain ye shall be, by weapon and by torment and by grief, and your houseless spirit shall come then to Mondos. There long shall ye abide and yearn for your bodies, and find little pity, though all whom ye have slain should entreat for you. And those that endure in Middle Earth and come not to Mondos shall grow weary of the world as with a great burden, and shall wane and become as shadows of regret before the younger race that cometh after. The Valar have spoken. So yeah, that's a very not nice sounding prophecy.
So is this where so we know that the Eldar were created to be immortal. So but we also know that they can be killed.
They can be slain, that's right.
Right. Is this where was that part of the original plan? Okay. So this is not where that.
Well, yeah, Fenway is slain by Melkor at the beginning of this chapter.
Duh. Yeah.
And then of course Miriel dies, and
she wasn't
but
killed.
Well, you could argue that she was slain in childbirth, right? As a consequence of childbirth.
I feel like that's more natural than being murdered. But
yeah, it is. And there's something that's an interesting case, and I'm not sure it actually applies. But then I believe, we don't have specific cases, but I believe that there would be, like, Melkor probably would have killed a lot of the elves, right? Back before and when they were living in Quevianion.
So this is that part is not new, right?
No,
I mean,
no, it's just saying that in this specific case of the Noldor, right? Those that go forward on this path, that this is what they're going to face, right?
Gotcha.
It's kind of being like, look, you've chosen this path, and this is what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to keep that prophecy in mind as we go forward in the rest of the story to see all the things that end up happening, because there actually is the battle of unnumbered tears, right? That ends up happening. So amongst other battles where bad things happen. So
And all of this is the result of the kinslaying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the description of the dispossessed,
Mm-hmm.
that's very, very sad
Yeah.
to me, because it's like you think about being disowned, right? I mean, that it's almost like being disowned on steroids. Like, it's just like, not only are you not owned, but you are like, no one possesses you. Like, it's a very lonely, like, just dark prophecy.
Yeah.
You know,
It's,
like, you just think about just being dispossessed. I mean, that just sounds terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very horrible, for sure.
But not undeserved, I don't think.
That's right.
Yeah.
We do learn that Finarfin at some point turns back, and he goes back and he actually receives the pardon of the Valar, and he becomes the king of the Noldor remnant in the Blessed Realm, right? So for any Noldor that stay behind, he becomes the king. But actually, his children continue on the journey, right? So Finarfin's children being Finrod, Angrod, Egnor, and Galadriel. So they continue on the journey over to Beleriand.
Took a lot of guts on his part.
Yeah.
And a lot of humility.
Yeah. Finarfin seems like somebody I would like. He's apparently pretty soft spoken and everything like that. And, so, man, it must have stunk though, to like have his kids go off, right.
Yeah.
On this journey. But eventually come back. So.
And it's nice that he was like the Valar took him back, like they had mercy on him. Yeah. He was kind of like a prodigal son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then, so they arrive in the far north. So this host that continues on the journey, the host of the Noldor, continues Fëanor and company first and sail the ships to the northwest of Beleriand. So Fëanor and company sail the ships, right? So they take the ships and they're like, we're going to cross over with the ships, then we'll send some back, and the rest of y'all can use those to come over.
Because there weren't enough.
Right. There weren't enough to carry them all.
Yeah.
But they get over, and this is what happens. When they were landed, Medros, the eldest of his sons, and on a time the friend of Fingon, ere Morgoth's lies came between, spoke to Fëanor, saying, now what ships and rowers will you spare to return, and whom shall they bear hither first? Fingon the valiant? Then Fëanor laughed as one fey, and he cried, none and none. What I have left behind I count now no loss. Needless baggage on the road it is proved. Let those that cursed my name curse me still, and wind their way back to the cages of the Valar. Let the ships burn. Then Medros alone stood aside, but Fëanor caused fire to be set to the white ships of the Teleri. So in that place, which was called Losgar, at the outlet of the Firth of Drengist, ended the fairest vessels that ever sailed the sea in a great burning, bright and terrible. And Fingolfin and his people saw the light afar off, red beneath the clouds, and they knew that they were betrayed. This was the first fruits of the kinslaying and the doom of the Noldor. So Fëanor gets over the other side, and he's like, forget the rest of them, Fingolfin and co. We're done. Burn the ships. I mean,
like, has Fingolfin done anything? Like,
no, Fingolfin's been like, I don't agree with this, but I'll, it's basically I'll come with you. And he's just like, at this point, he's like, we don't need those guys.
But then they've done nothing. They've done nothing to.
They literally helped them in the kinslaying.
Exactly.
It's like.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they betrayed Fëanor in some way.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it's and that's what I was calling out earlier when I was talking about Melkor and Ungoliant, like, in their co-conspirator ways, and then they accomplish what Melkor wants, and all of a sudden he doesn't really have need of her anymore, right? And it's the same thing here. Fëanor's like, I got where I wanted to go, and honestly, they're probably just going to hold us back, right? If we continue with this, because all I want to get is my Silmarils, and then I want to continue on my journey. It's like, dude, are you sure you're prepared to go up against Melkor and all of his armies at this point? Which we'll see. All right. So basically Fingolfin and company continue the long journey, but it's through the Helcaraxe, the Hell of Ice that's at the very far north that connects. It's like kind of a land bridge that connects the two. And that's how they continue their journey. And it's a long one, and it's perilous, but they do eventually complete the journey themselves over a much longer period of time. So,
and it says here that I just want to call it again. It says the fire of their hearts was young, and led by Fingolfin and his sons, and by Finrod and Galadriel, they dared to pass into the bitterest north. So they another great kind of warrior description of Galadriel, because she helped lead the charge through this very perilous crossing.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is chapter 9, the flight of the Noldor, you guys.
So
Wow,
good.
so much in that. And I feel like this is just one where there's like we could have done probably 3 or 4 episodes just on this
I think we did a pretty good
chapter
job
alone.
though.
I think we did a pretty good job of
Yeah.
covering it,
Yeah.
But we'll love to hear, your further thoughts,
Mhm.
things we skipped over, just things we didn't draw out as much in the text. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments or via correspondence, however you choose to get it to us.
Mhm.
So, all right. Haiku time.
Let's do it.
All right. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Oh,
Boom.
you just keep winning.
I just keep winning. You go first.
All right. Holy light darkened. Prideful words dare foolish deeds. Blessed be the blood.
Oh.
I've always been
That's
fascinated by
really
the idea
good.
that blessed comes from the same root as blood.
Does it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Go figure.
That's awesome. I feel like I shouldn't even read mine because that one's so good.
Oh, well, you got to read it.
All
You
right.
just got to.
Okay. Here's mine. Sundered once again. Lies, lust, lead to destruction. Jewels of flame, kinslaying.
That's good. I like that.
Thanks. Just because it rhymes, probably.
I'm a fan of rhyming.
As am I.
No, it's good. It's really good.
Thank you.
All right, we have a haiku to read. We're recording a little earlier than normal this week, y'all. So some of y'all may have haiku that you weren't able to get to us by the time we recorded. Drop them in the comments, and if you send them to us, otherwise, we'll do our best to drop them in the comments as well. All right. So this one, we have one from Dawn J, one of our patrons.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Dawn's haiku goes as follows. Once mighty Melkor ignites Fëanor's anger, Morgoth evermore.
Nice.
Like it. That's
really
good stuff, Dawn.
Yeah.
Good
indeed.
stuff.
Very, very good.
All right. So like I said, drop your haiku in the comments below for this chapter and send us your haiku. The earlier, the better. The earlier you get it to us, the more likely it is to get on the episode. So, all right. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on. And we do. So I believe that GGQ, one of our listeners and watchers, dropped a comment on YouTube, which was 5 stars in a comment. And I think this means that she put it as an iTunes review, but I don't know. But I'm just going to read it as a 5-star review, assuming it was meant to be a review on one of our listening platforms. So 5 stars. Never disappointed. I'm not well read in the mythology, and I learned a lot of facts while still feeling comfortable being able to speculate about what I don't know. I see the whole of Amon and Arda as religious and political, 2 of my favorite conversation starters. When both can be broached in the context of Middle Earth, I get my needs met and also stay out of trouble. But the best thing about John and Greta is their obvious love and commitment to the care and nurturing of each other. Family-friendly show to help me enlighten my children and grandkids who are slowly coming into the stories. John has also written 2 lovely little books to accompany the Silmarillion reader, Tolkien's Overture concerning the music of the Ainur and Tolkien's Requiem concerning Beren and Luthien. I hope there are more to come, especially to address the Catholic aspects of this relationship between Melkor and Ungoliant. It's one of the most disturbing stories in the lore, and I feel there is a deeper telling to be parsed out.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, Gigi, thank you so much for your kind words about the show. And I do. One of these days, I'm to get around to writing more. It's a busy time in our lives right now. Our kids have kind of reached an age where, we really need to give them as much time as we can. And but it's definitely on my list of things to do. Should the good Lord will it. So, but I really appreciate your comments. It's really, really very kind. I'm so glad you enjoy the show and are with us. And I love your comments whenever you leave them in our show notes. So thanks, Gigi.
Now I'm feeling like, yes, thank you, Gigi. But now I'm kind of feeling like maybe we didn't do that. Maybe we should have talked more about the relationship between Melkor and Ungoliant.
It's a fascinating one, isn't it?
Absolutely fascinating.
I mean, yeah, well,
we'll put it on our deep dive list.
That's right. That's right. All right, you guys. So drop us a line. YouTube comments or wherever you want to get to us, tolkienroadpodcast@gmail.com or wherever you can find us. You can also leave comments on the episodes on tolkienroad.com, by the way, too. Not as many people do that, but that's also a place that you can kind of you put your own thoughts, share your own thoughts for the world to see on a particular episode, on a particular chapter. All right. We will have our live stream coming up at the end of this month. We're still got to work out that exact date. We thought we had one nailed down, but got to figure that out. But stay tuned. Will be happening at the end of April. All right. Well, that's all for this episode, you guys. Thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R.,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Jacob Lockham,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T.,
Red Hawk,
Shannon S.,
Brian O.,
Emilio P.,
Zeke F.,
James A.,
James L.,
Chris L.,
Chuck F.,
Azia V.,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C.,
David of Pints with Jack,
Jonathan D.,
Eric S.,
Eric B.,
Johanna T.,
Mike M.,
Robert H.,
Paul D.,
Julia,
Werty,
Matthew W.,
Joe Bagelman,
Chris K.,
Jacob S.,
and Don J.,
as well as those celebrating their Patreon anniversary this month in April of 2022, Julia,
Rebecca R.,
Jonathan D.,
Ty M.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.